I think it's absolutely implied. I guess some of the audience is somewhat surprised that you hold up Scandinavia as an example. You could have chosen to describe Scandinavia as the end station for huge welfare states, high tax level, and efficient economies, which would be the right decision, I guess, but still, that could be it. We have shown that there is an alternative to health, as the way we have, at least until now, organized our societies. The same thing, I'm working in the financial sector, and just give you one advice. Take care, do not invest in emerging markets in any circumstance. You could have chosen a starting point for your equity return history, some years earlier, some years later, and you have come to a completely different conclusion over time. There's no correlation between growth for a country and return on the stock market, basically because it's having more stocks to divide the earnings between. Then I comment on the decline of the West. As far as I know, the Western countries are still growing over time. Certainly growth is slower than, let's say, in the late 1800s, during most of the 19th century. But still, we have growth. Productivity is increasing. Robert Gordon, a US economist, trying to explain why growth has slowed. And it's quite simple, he thinks. The reason is that there are no low-hanging fruits on inventions to profit from. So, as the Western countries are forefront, it's difficult to run to increase the speed as fast as we used to do in the early ages. That's quite natural. It's not due to dysfunctional societies. It's just not because of lack of good ideas either, because we have begun them, but they're not gaining the same profit versus growth as the basic inventions we did some 100 years before. Yeah, the question is, what's a comment on Robert Gordon's explanation for the growth? That of course is slower than it used to be, and it's slower than in those countries that have learned your 6 acts story. That's a good story, but that shouldn't be taken as a proof that the Western countries is not working anymore. And one last one on Europe. What's your basic explanation for what happened in Spain and Ireland before the financial crisis? And what has that to do with the monetary union?
Well, the Scandinavian story, you've got 4 points here. It's a bit like sitting in an examination. The first question you asked was about Scandinavia, and I'm not going to pretend to know more about this than a room full of Norwegians. That would be reckless. The story, in any case, can't be told simply because, in fact, there are big differences between, say, Norway and Finland. And so every time I see the economists talking about the Scandinavian model, I'm afraid I reach for my revolver. The simplest answer I can give in the available time is this. What has been shown in Scandinavia is that relatively small homogeneous societies can run highly distributed, redistributive welfare systems in which, and can generate the growth to finance them through high human capital. So having really good education has been a crucial part of the success of this part of the world. And that, plus in Norway's case, natural resources, has been a very powerful winning combination. There's not many countries in the world that have both natural resources and good institutions. Canada's one, Norway's another. The rest of the Scandinavians are relying mainly on the resources between their ears, and with good education, that has delivered. But when I say small homogeneous societies, I mean homogeneous. It's much harder to run the kind of system that you have created in these different countries with a substantial immigrant population that you fail to integrate into your economy. And the real test of the stability of the Scandinavian model lies there. These discrepancies in unemployment rates, which I mentioned in my lecture, are just one symptom of the problem. To have the kind of economy that integrates immigrants successfully, you can't be the Scandinavian model. You need the American model, which is a great deal more open, which there is far easier access to the employment market, and indeed far less redistribution. Here I buy David Goodhart's argument that the highly redistributive state requires high levels of homogeneity to function. When you lose that, the legitimacy soon comes into question. So much for Scandinavia. I should say that I want to think a lot more about this because it seems to me to be very crucial indeed. If I'm right that this is the serpent in the Scandinavian paradise, then we should look with great skepticism on claims that everybody can be Denmark. You know, when I hear the word flex security being used by French politicians, I feel skeptical, to put it mildly. On investment strategies, well, I had planned to show you all kinds of wonderful charts in this talk, but my host said no PowerPoint at the Nobel Institute, so no PowerPoint it was, and probably that was good for me and good for you. But it meant that you missed out on my nice chart on emerging market performance since 1989 versus European and American. You'd only have been wrong in 97, 98. Most of the rest of the time you'd have been really glad that you went for emerging markets. Right now, it would be probably suicidal strategy to invest in emerging markets, but that wasn't my recommendation at all. In fact, if you want a recommendation, I would just stay long dollar at this point. And if you want some more advice, those treasury yields look pretty nice to me, considering that at this point we're living in a much more deflationary world than Ben Bernanke seems to think. Third point, Robert Gordon. You know, the techno-pessimist view is one I'm quite sympathetic to, and I cite his work in the book. The problem, though, is that you have to ask yourself, where does technological innovation come from? Because it's not just somehow, as it were, falling from the sky. It comes from the innovative society, or not. And I think one of the crucial questions that we have to ask ourselves is, what exactly is going on to slow that innovative dynamic down? Here I think Peter Thiel is more illuminating than Robert Gordon, and I urge you to look at Thiel's commentary. After all, Thiel is himself an innovator, founder of PayPal. Thiel's one of the most thoughtful people in Silicon Valley, and unusual in arguing that in fact technological innovation is significantly less impressive now than it was in the 1940s and 1950s. We're all fixated on this thing, and indeed on Twitter, but as Peter says, you know, they promised us flying cars, and they gave us 24 characters, or whatever it is, 48 characters. Shows you how often I tweet. The final point was Spain and Ireland. Well, that's an easy one. So Spain and Ireland are in this monetary union, and they get Germany's monetary policy. Not such a great idea if you've got a massively overheating housing market.
What didn't happen? It happened at the same time in Iceland, in the Baltics, the so-called US part of the UK. It happened all over the world, about all the world, and then it comes at the same time.
Sure. It was, however, didn't happen in England. And one thing is for sure, neither the Irish nor the Spanish monetary authorities had any choice about what to do. Others had choice. The Fed had choice. And Greenspan chose not to follow the Taylor rule. He chose to keep interest rates far too low from 2002 to 2004. The Icelanders made their own autonomous, disastrous mistakes. But in the case of Spain and Ireland, there was no free will because they had no control.
So, ladies and gentlemen, there are many people who have come late to the party finding themselves sad